You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
Welcome to this episode of the Business of Practice podcast, where we focus on the business and human sides of equine veterinary medicine. In this episode, we're going to talk to two veterinarians who own solo practices focused on sports medicine, Drs. Ciera Guardia and Andrea Sotela. We're going to learn about their practices and their recommendations for those in the equine industry considering this option for their careers. I'm your host, Dr. Amy Grice, business consultant and former equine practice owner. The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you in 2024 by Care Credit. Dr. Guardia grew up in Texas. As a teenager and throughout her undergraduate career, she was a competitive FEI dressage rider, as well as competing in three-day eventing. She attended Texas A&M University, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in animal science, and then her DVM from the veterinary school. Her career goal was to be a leader in equine, orthopedics, and sports medicine, and she became qualified as an FEI treating veterinarian early in her career. After working with several prominent practices and honing her skills, Dr. Guardia started her own solo sports medicine practice, Guardia Equine, 8 years ago in Houston. Dr. Sotela is a native of Potomac, Maryland. She grew up riding and showing hunters and jumpers as well as playing polo. As a young woman, she spent several years working as a veterinary assistant for a prominent show veterinarian on the East Coast show circuit, which allowed her to gain a strong background in lameness diagnosis and sports medicine. After earning her Bachelor of Science degree in animal sciences at the University of Maryland, Dr. Sotela attended veterinary school at The Ohio State University, graduating in 2006. After veterinary school, she completed an internship at the Littleton Equine Medical Center. She's certified in veterinary chiropractic and has completed all the modules from the International Society of Equine Locomotor Pathology, also known as ICELP, and wishes to obtain certification. Dr. Sotela is the owner and founder of Cavallo Veterinary Services, a solo practice limited to sports medicine, based in Rhinebeck, New York. Welcome, Dr. Guardia. Welcome, Dr. Sotela.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks
glad
for having
to
us.
have you here. You both chose to limit your work to primarily sports medicine when you opened your practices, and I'm eager to learn more about your experiences and how you made that all happen, and how your interest in sports medicine developed. Dr. Guardia, I see that you were like so into horses, so it makes some sense. But really, how did you get going on this path?
Well, for me, as you already mentioned, I was very into horses. I was a working student and an assistant trainer for a dressage barn, eventing barns, and things like that growing up. And my family didn't have a ton of money to buy a fancy warm blood or anything like that. So the horses I rode were kind of either in the training program, catch rode, or they had behavioral problems or soundness issues. And nobody else really wanted to deal with them. So one horse came into my life that his name was Manny, and he was owned by someone else. And we now know he had a deep flexor tendon injury in his left front leg and about the level of his pastern region. And he had never had an MRI or any kind of advanced imaging, but they assumed that was what was going on. And he had a neurectomy prior, a couple of years before I was riding him or anything like that. He came into my life because he had a rearing problem, and the trainer that I was an assistant for and a working student was designated to try to fix it. And she worked on that, but a lot of that was behavioral for him because of the pain that he had chronically. And so we worked with the veterinarian that was working on him. I was probably 18 or 19 at this time. And I'd always wanted to work with horses, and I thought I wanted to be a horse trainer up to that point. And then he had this cataclysmic injury that actually precluded me from being able to show him at the young rider competition because he was going to be injured and rehabbing long after I had aged out of that eligibility. So I ended up grooming for that team instead of competing. So I got the experience, but I didn't get to ride him. But through that, his injury, I was able to volunteer and then work for that veterinarian here in the Houston area, and helped with his rehabilitation, which turned into almost 2 years of rehab. And he was pre-St. George dressage when he was injured, and we got him back to 4th level and back in the show ring. And then the owner of that horse ended up giving him to me, presented me his papers and everything after I showed that getting him back into the ring, and made a big deal to present them to me and stuff. So that horse changed my life because of that injury. And at the time, I thought that injury was just the end of everything for me at 18, 19 years old. And this one shot I had at this fancy horse, and now it's gone. But now I know that I credit that horse for changing my life, because he opened my eyes to the world of sports medicine and rehabilitation and diagnostic imaging and all of that. So that horse is the reason that I'm doing what I'm doing. And I honestly, the vets that I had worked for mostly did sports medicine. So I didn't even know horses could choke until I was in vet school. Emergencies kind of, oh yeah, there you go. Dr. Sotela's in the same spot. So I've always had the sports medicine bug. I look at a lameness exam or a pre-purchase exam very similar to like a murder mystery or something, like trying to figure out, put all the clues together and all the information that you have, the history and what the owners are telling you, what they're not telling you, all of that, and trying to figure out the puzzle. My mom watched a lot of Agatha Christie TV when I was a kid and read those books. So I think the combination of those things made me really love the puzzle. And I get very stressed out not knowing like the emergency ideas. I used to do a lot of emergencies when I started as a veterinarian during my internship, after my internship for the first few years before I started my practice. And I get so stressed out, anticipating the phone ringing, not knowing I love planning things. And I love knowing what my day should look like. It never turns out the way you want it to look like, but I like things kind of ordered like that. And so sports medicine fit right into that. So Manny changed my life. And then the rest of my life has been changed by the mentors and investors and things like that I've had going forward.
That's fabulous. How about you, Dr. Sotela?
So you had me laughing there, because I too was horrified the first time I saw a horse choke in my internship. I guess I didn't even see one during vet school. So yeah, mainly sports medicine before then. But mine's a little bit of a funny story too, as a horse crazed child, riding as a child, and then finally getting a thoroughbred out of a field and getting to start being a working student for a hunter jumper facility, and traveling to Florida and Vermont and all over the East Coast. And, my parents weren't horse people and weren't into it, and the finances weren't there. And my trainer, who we joke could have sold a screen door to an Eskimo, decided that after qualifying for Washington and taking me to Washington, she was going to convince my parents that I was going to go to Ocala that winter and ride in Ocala and work in Ocala. And so she devised up this plan where the horse show veterinarian that she was using at the time zipped up in his golf cart and whisked her and my mother away at the showgrounds of the Washington International Horse Show. And when my mother returned from her golf cart ride, my trainer had convinced my mother that I was going to go to Ocala for 5 weeks and work for the horse show veterinarian and work as a working student, and somehow horse show in between it all. And so I got to spend a winter in Ocala, and the bug for sports medicine was born. The bug for equine veterinary medicine had been planted when I was 7. But the sports medicine bug was, what was I, around 16 at that point. So I ended up actually working for that veterinarian for all through the rest of high school and undergrad and vet school. And that's really where that came from, I would say. And then really honing that love for performance medicine in my internship and seeing the different types of performance horses, Western performance horses, English performance horses, and seeing that there was a much wider ability and need for sports medicine, not just at horse shows, which was my thought process going into veterinary school and going into my internship. So I would say those different experiences are what opened my eyes to what was out there. And then being in general ambulatory practice for 14 years before starting my own practice, definitely allowed me to hone my skills and get a good idea of what the industry needed in my area.
Yeah, it's so interesting how similar your stories are of how you got you know, started in sports medicine and just that passion for helping the athlete. It's pretty cool.
The Business of Practice podcast is brought to you by Care Credit. Care Credit keeps equine veterinarians at the heart of care by providing horse owners with simple, budget-friendly financing options. By helping to bridge the gap between cost and care, Care Credit supports healthy financial relationships between veterinarians and their clients. Clients have a flexible way to pay over time for all types of care, and practices get paid in 2 business days. It's a payment experience everyone can feel good about.
So what motivated you to start your own practice? Dr. Sotela, what made you want to plan your own life?
Yeah, well, that's the main thing, right? Planning your own life, quality of life, ability to make my own schedule, work as much as I want to, as hard as I want to, or sometimes as little as I want to, for who I want to. The love of the puzzle, like what Ciera was talking about earlier, is definitely my favorite aspect of sports medicine practice. And the love of the athlete, the relationships with the clients. Those are the main motivating factors, I think, for sports medicine specific private solo practice.
How about you, Dr. Guardia? What motivated you to start your practice?
Oh, I would say I would echo everything that Dr. Sotela said for sure, as far as the love of the relationship with the owners and the athletes, and truly treating them like athletes as opposed to just pets, which a lot of owners do still treat them like pets as well, but to remember that they're athletes. I love that aspect. I think I had some more negative motivators in the beginning of my reasoning wanting to get into solo practice. When I first started, it was more of, I think I would have become one of the statistics that we see now of folks leaving veterinary medicine altogether, or at least leaving equine practice, given the environment that I was working in after my internship, the first associate position that I had. I was there for 2 years, and just a toxic work environment, a lot of difficulty climbing the ladder in that environment, not a lot of fostering healthy relationships, both with your clients, with the technicians, with the other doctors there, a lot of competition due to mostly pro-sal, like commission-based work and things like that. And I just didn't see any growth there from a skill level. I knew I wanted to do more sports medicine, but that just wasn't an option there. The owner did a lot of that, and growth wasn't really happening. And then beyond that, financial stability. I mean, I was single at the time, or had a boyfriend, but wasn't married, didn't have a home or anything like that. And the idea of having enough financial freedom to be able to move out of an apartment and get a house, or get married, or all of those things, just seemed like I wasn't going to be able to make the money that I needed to, that in addition to student loans, which are huge. And when I approached the owner of the practice that I was working for and inquired about buying into the practice, if that was still an option, as it was when I hired on, she made it clear it was not. And so at that point, I thought, well, what am I doing? And I was far away from my family. My mom and dad and my sister lived about 3.5 hours south from where I was. And my now husband, just my boyfriend at the time, lived 3.5 hours north of where I was. So I was really stuck, and had an opportunity to meet with an older practitioner, established veterinarian that saw potential in me and said, well, let's see what we can figure out. And he was able to help me from a financial investment as well as a mentorship investment standpoint. And he's the reason that I started the practice. And I never thought I could do that. I always thought I would fail if I tried to do anything of a leadership role like that. And he believed in me more than I could believe in myself. Which I think that's a good mentor. But anyways, he's the reason that I took the leap to try to start something that sounded terrifying. I was actually told by a veterinarian in my area years before that if I tried, not me, but another veterinarian had come back from Florida or somewhere else and tried to start her own practice in that area, maybe 5-10 years before, I would have done the same. And he told me, quote, she's starving to death. She will starve to death. And that hung in the back of my mind the whole time. Like, nope, you'll starve to death. And I thought, what if I do? But also, like, what is my other option? So I didn't have as many positive motivating factors in the beginning, but now, having established a practice and having seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, but mostly good, I can see all of the positive things that Dr. Sotela mentioned. And I love that she started with the positive. I think that's very good. I'm not as good at that sometimes, but having all of those flexibility, freedom to design your life, customization, that's what not only my generation as a millennial, but every generation coming, that's what is going to keep us in practice and allow us to be better doctors day to day. So the flexibility allows me to be able to be better at my job every day, and therefore I can help the horses better.
So listeners that would like to read more about Ciera's story, she did a paper at AAEP in 2021, Nashville? 22. San Antonio. And so I'll post the link for any of the listeners that want to look at that paper. She did a great job, and it's a pretty cool story. Dr. Sotela, you were laughing. I'd love to hear what you have to say too.
I think she gave me a virtual high five.
Yeah, virtual high five. Yeah.
High five.
My experience was also very similar to yours, a longer experience than yours, which I am very thankful for all of that time and all of that ability to develop myself as a practitioner. But I too was probably nearing being one of the statistics, which is impossible to believe considering the fact that there's absolutely nothing else I would ever see myself or want to be doing. And the level of medicine that I'm practicing right now and the level of client interactions that I'm having right now and interactions with the patients, I mean, the lack of toxicity in my life is so apparent in every layer of my being and those around me. It's pretty shocking. But I am very, very thankful for many of the same things you stated.
So you may have trouble remembering that far back, Dr. Guardia, but in those first couple of years of practice, what was like one of the most important things that you learned?
Oh, I don't know that I could pick one. I learned so much.
Yeah.
I learned a lot of what not to do. But I think the biggest lessons that I can recall now, I mean, definitely day to day, going to horse shows and meeting people or passing out my credit card, my business card. Don't do that. That would also be a lesson to learn. I mean, advertising and things like that. Yes, I learned lots of little things of how to leverage social media to my advantage and things like that. But I think what I learned the most for me personally was that I can do this and that I am as good as anyone else that wants to do this type of sports medicine specific or claim to be, I wouldn't say an expert in that field, but focused on that field and wanting to offer specialized care in that field. I don't think that there's anything that precludes anyone else to be able to do that. And I had to learn that I am good enough to do those things. I had to learn a lot of self-confidence, and I had to learn that it's okay if someone goes for a second opinion, or it's okay if you don't get to follow up with that case because they don't do what you recommend, but it's, all those things. I had to be okay with those things. So I think for me personally, I had more personal growth for those first few years as growing as a matured individual, growing in confidence in myself, confidence in my abilities. I second the ISELP comment that was made with Dr. Sotela's bio, because ISELP was a huge reason why I started doing what I do as far as imaging. During my internship, all the other interns, there was 5 of us, and the other 4, 2 of them went to AAEP and 2 of them went to the ACVS conference during the internship year. So I was the odd man out because I covered for them while they were gone. And so I was allowed to go to an ISELP at the end of my internship. Like I literally went to an ISELP and never came back to the internship. These was the last weekend. And that changed my life. I met people there that are still in my corner, still rooting for me. I was way in over my head on diagnostic abilities, but I lack one module to obtain my certification now as well. So I think that those types of meetings reminded me that I can, I guess in Texas we'd say, run with the big dogs. You can do this if you apply yourself and you work hard and you really stick to that area of specialty. I find it much easier to be a specialized veterinarian than it is to be a general practitioner. I don't think I could go back and be a GP, or at least a very good one, because you have to be so much more flexible. And I have become so honed into that one area that I think that would be difficult. But back to your original question of what I learned, I think I learned more personal growth than anything. I learned how to believe in myself and listen to my gut. If a client feels shady, they're shady 100%. Especially when the beginning pre-purchases, I did a lot of pre-purchases as the new kid on the block, non-biased opinions. And I learned who you can and cannot trust. I think I learned more about myself than I did about practice.
Yeah, I think that's a very important message for everybody to hear that's listening. I can do this. How about you, Dr. Sotela? Something similar?
Well, funny enough, I'm just 2.5 years in to this solo practice adventure. So I guess that my learning list is quite new. Like we were talking about before, I absolutely love my job again with full heart and full mind and just full energy. I feel like that young kid in my internship again, where I'm just jumping out of bed, can't wait to see what I'm going to see that day, or how things are going to look that I saw the week before. It's just that absolute love for the work and for the job. Similar, realizing that I'm allowed to say no and that it isn't a personal attack on anyone. Sometimes you say no because it's not someone that your energies match and you're going to work well with or get the right results with. And sometimes you say no because, like we were just talking about, it may not be an area of practice that you feel comfortable with. For example, for me, that's always been reproductive work. I've never gravitated towards it. And for example, I joke with my clients that I didn't purchase a rectal probe, though I should probably have it for imaging sacroiliac joints rectally. So don't tell my ISELP friends that I don't have a rectal probe.
No, I tell people that all the time. I use the same exact line. Like, okay. I would, but I don't have a rectal probe, and I'm never buying one.
Let's see what else. The whole imposter syndrome thing, it's so tough. It's tough, especially when clients go and run with the big dogs or go to Florida and come back. And, sometimes I have that little bit of imposter syndrome feeling creeping in, but I realize that the relationships that I've established with these clients and their horses and the trust that they have in me, that goes farther than any environment or any fan, what is that? Lights and, the
smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. And I guess what I've realized the most in the last 2 years is that our industry really still has room for concierge service and concierge care. And I know that that's something that we battle with, should people have our cell phones? Should people not have our cell phones? How available should I be? Should that availability be limited to certain hours and certain days? Should I be looking at my phone during dinner? And I think it's different for all of us. Everyone has to decide what they're comfortable with and what works for them. And just because one set of boundaries works for one person doesn't mean that they'll work for another. And for me, what really I think bonds me the most to my clients and my work is that one-on-one concierge service and that availability. And it doesn't bother me. I actually really have realized how much I enjoy that aspect of it.
So when you were thinking about recommendations for somebody who wanted to do just this, lean in, focus on sports medicine, what kind of recommendations would you give them as they started out, Dr. Sotela?
I think the hardest thing for me when I remember sitting at my desk, life was changing around me, not all my choices. And I was trying to figure out where I was going to land and what I was going to do. And I was thinking about structuring the practice and what I was going to do. It was that idea of suddenly limiting the services that people were used to seeing me for and used to me being willing to provide: vaccines, routine care, emergencies. And how was I going to stick to just a list of services that I was going to do and not stray from that list? And I think that that is probably the most important thing that I did. Make that list, stick to that list, be transparent with clients, explain to them what I was trying to grow and what I was trying to develop, and realizing that they completely understood that and embraced that. And encouraging them to keep their relationship with a full service practice for vaccines and other services, yearly health exams, et cetera. And then the other things that I'm so glad that I did initially in the structuring: social media. It just helped spread the word. I mean, I feel there's no better free advertising. And then the other thing was investing in all the equipment that I wanted from the start, that made sense, nothing insane, but the quality and level of equipment that I was used to working with and or strived to work with, I just fired it off from the get-go. Even though it meant a bigger initial loan, I don't regret that in the least. I think that was very important.
I think setting your brand identity and, being your brand from day one, especially with the history that you had in the community, I think that made a lot of sense.
Thank you.
Dr. Guardia, what recommendations would you give to someone? Your path was a little slower in development, but very successful.
Yes, you've seen my numbers, Dr. Grace, so you knew how financially successful it was too. But I think twofold. I definitely echo what Dr. Sotela said about making sure you have appropriate equipment, and that I wrote about that in the paper that we published as well. But so the books that I read that were very helpful for me, one was called A Company of One, that described the quality of being in a smaller business overall, but in my area of expertise, that was towards veterinary medicine. And it talked about growing bigger for growing bigger's sake is not necessarily the right way to go. Whereas being a smaller company, but providing the highest quality is the most important thing. And you can grow financially without getting significantly larger, meaning adding associates, more technicians, building a hospital, those types of things. You don't have to do that in order to grow. And I thought that was really poignant. And then also looking at the fact that 80% of your clientele may be your biggest volume, but 20% of your clientele are going to be pulling in 80% of your revenue, 80% of your profit. And so sometimes those 20% that are the diehard, they'll use nobody else, they only want you to look at their Joe Schmo paint pony or whatever it is, those clients will do whatever they have to keep you in business because they care about you and they want you. Whereas the rest of them, maybe you see them once a year, twice a year, but investing in the clients that provide the most revenue and they are the most dedicated or loyal to you, that has really been helpful for me to understand that some clients come and go. Some clients are just looking for the least expensive option or whoever's available today. But the 20% that cares that much about you, they'll still be there. And so pouring in my extra time after hours with a quick answer to a quick question is worth it with those clients because I know that it's going to pay off in the long run for the connection and the relationship that we have, as opposed to a client that just wants to know how much a Coggins test is or something like that. So the 80-20 rule has really helped me.
Absolutely. So as we come to a close here, are there any further things you'd like to share, Dr. Sotela, before we say goodbye today?
I think, it's important to realize that sports medicine practice, I think, doesn't mean any one thing or have to fit one mold. I mainly do sports medicine on horses that don't go to Florida in the winter, and a lot of them are backyard pleasure horses or local show horses, and those horses need quality sports medicine and quality imaging and quality care as well. I think many times there's this label on sports medicine or this echelon that everyone thinks you have to work in to have a successful sports medicine practice, and I think that couldn't be farther from the truth. I've been able to practice in one area without long distance travel. I mean, sometimes I drive long distances, but I don't have to relocate during certain seasons of the year. And I really enjoy my clientele. I enjoy not being in a hurry. I enjoy spending time and not feeling like I have to pack my day full of appointments to make ends meet. I was really afraid to be alone in the truck all day and work by myself and not be surrounded by an office full of staff and an assistant. And it's actually been amazing to work on my own. And I think my most important thing to say is that happiness in equine practice exists and it's out there, and we can all find what that means for us. And I hope that everybody is able to get back to that and find that, because it's been amazing.
I love that. Happiness in equine practice exists. Oh my God. Dr. Guardia, quickly, can you top that?
I don't think that I can, actually. I absolutely loved everything she said. I echo it 100%. I'm 8 years into owning my practice, and I am so grateful that not only do I have the ability to have a very fulfilling practice, a practice I'm really proud of, clients that I really truly care about. Like, I actually miss their horses when I haven't seen them for a while. Just this past weekend, I have a filly I just bought as a yearling. She's 3 now, turning 4, and she went to her first horse show. And the number of clients that came up to me, they were also showing. They came up to meet her in her stall or watch her go or send me congratulatory texts or come into the stall aisle and say hi and, congratulate me. It even surprised the trainer. He was like, I knew she had a fan club, but I didn't realize. And I thought that was so fulfilling, knowing that even my husband was surprised. He's like, I knew you said you had clients here, but that's crazy. And it was just really cool to see that I have fostered a really amazing group of clients that care about me as a person and really value my opinion, but also value my personal time. I think has been really cool to know that they are supportive of those things, because it makes me a better veterinarian. When I first stopped doing emergencies, I stopped doing them for non-clients initially, and then I stopped doing them for clients altogether. And I just told people, I want to be the best veterinarian I can be. And in order to do a very thorough pre-purchase exam at 8 a.m., I can't have been up with a colic all night. And I'm not as good of a person or as good of a veterinarian if I'm sleep deprived. And the clients that really bought into the quality they were getting from me were like, absolutely, that makes perfect sense. And the clients that didn't like that because it was inconvenient for them, they aren't in my practice anymore. And I remember being really sad about that initially, but it has lightened my load so much. I get to truly enjoy and feel fulfilled by my profession now because I have been able to customize my life. So I echo everything Dr. Sotela said from that perspective.
That is fabulous. Thank you both for joining me this afternoon for this podcast. What a great conversation. Thank you all listening out there today. And our big thanks to our sponsor of the Business of Practice podcast, Care Credit. We couldn't do it without you. And to all my listeners out there, be brave, embrace change.